Hoping we get that on the recording. You want to repeat that again for the audience?
My room kind of smells like piss. I got some weird shit going on in my room. Half the time my room smells like someone just hotboxed it, like straight up just pulled out a joint and just full on smoked it, like hotboxed my room. And then sometimes it smells like pee, and sometimes it smells like goodness and wonderberries and amazing awesome balls.
Nice.
Yeah.
My house has been attacked by ants recently.
Oh no.
And not like the exciting 50-foot ants, like just normal sized ones that bite your feet when you try to do dishes. It's quite devastating. So anecdote time.
Yeah.
I'm at a friend's wedding this weekend with Lauren in Colorado. And we're sitting in the seats, we're watching the ceremony. Mm-hmm. The groom began reading his vows.
Oh no.
And the vows were incredible. Like, they were thoughtful, they were insightful, they were humorous. They made her laugh and cry in the space of a minute and a half, but they went on for 5. The entire audience was just completely captivated by his rhetoric, his prose, his poise, and how earnest he was being with his partner, his soon-to-be wife. And, half the people are in tears by the end of it. His speech is wrapping up. And Lauren turns to me and she looks me dead in the eye and she says, "Your vows have to be at least that good, so help me God." And I'm like, that's your takeaway?
No, that's too funny. No, she knows what she wants. I don't blame her for it. I don't fault her for it. Come on.
I am dating an Amazon. Straight to the point.
An Amazon.
Yeah. Naomi,
you're dating
welcome
Jeff
back. Dating what?
Jeff Bezos. That was a really bad joke.
I've made much worse. Naomi, welcome back to Why Will No One Date These Guys? It's probably because of the book we're reading, the misogynistic text that makes us all feel bad. But someone's got to read it, and that someone I decided has to be us. Specifically me, and then you get to listen to me. Reread it.
I'm reading, I'm rereading, yeah.
We're a podcast. Sex, dating, relationships. We used to discuss all of those. Now we just discuss one fucking book. It doesn't stop. This is a nightmare. Every waking moment is just a haunting fever dream. I miss my wife. My cats don't talk to me anymore. My house is being consumed by ants. It's all bad. Do you have anything to add before we jump into the main content of the episode?
I'm canceling the podcast when this is all over.
That's fair. I made you do this. Oh, I have something to add. Lester's Fixin's Cucumber Soda. That is my drink of choice for this week. It is kind of like radioactive green. It almost looks kind of like lime Gatorade. It has the exact same hue of lime Gatorade. And it's fine. It's like musty cucumbers, slightly sweeter than other cucumber sodas I've had. It's appropriate. Naomi's listening to TikToks as I attempt to navigate this business by herself.
I opened it and it was on my TikTok, okay?
I calls it how I sees it. Naomi, we've been reading chapter 6 for far too long. Hopefully we're going to finish it. Today is the day. Do you remember anything about chapter 6?
He said some misogynistic shit. We went through it way too slow. And that's about it.
Yeah. Chapter 6 has just been him being like, women have violated the new contract, and here's a bunch of reasons why. And then he's like, well, men, how are you actually supposed to navigate this crazy wild west of dating? And he began giving us advice in the last episode of how to do so. And he will continue giving advice in this episode, and it's all going to be great. 100%, not a doubt in my mind. Shall we?
Mm-hmm.
Okie dokie. So jumping back in. He says, let's finally return to marriage. Marriage is hands down the dumbest decision a man can make. You must be a complete moron to agree to a marriage contract into today's world. only 14% of marriages are happy, with half ending in divorce and the remainder being miserable. Before we get into this section, I should note that we dug into marriage stats in episode 4. Boy, that seems so long ago, right? The main gist is people are divorcing less now, marriages seem to be getting stronger, and most people, or the people most likely to divorce, actually seem to be those who got married under, in his terms, the old contract, not those impacted by modern stuff. So his premise that the new contract is ruining marriages just isn't held up by the available evidence we could find.
There's
Well,
this
you're married.
thing in hold on. There's this thing in How I Met Your Mother where they talk about pulling statistics out of your ass, because one of the main characters just says when a man, you're 85% more likely, and pulls stupid statistics out of his ass because he's a man whore and he needs to justify his actions. And so I feel when every time he uses because in How I Met Your Mother it was always 85% or 89% or something like that. I feel like this is what he's doing. It's always 14%.
14 is nearly the opposite of 85. There's
No,
something
no, no.
to
I'm
that.
talking about in this person's case.
Well, he's saying 86% of marriages are unhappy. So maybe
I feel like you're
onto
digging
something.
way too far into what I'm saying and just take it at its base level.
Fair enough. Should your marriage end in divorce, you face tremendous legal and financial costs, which often render you poor for the rest of your life. To that, I would say maybe doing the dishes for your wife once in a while seems a little less crazy if those are the stakes you're dealing with. Yet despite its atrocious and dangerous track record, a significant percent of the population still gets married. This is in part due to the cultural and traditional reasons, as getting married is what humans have historically done. It is also partly due to the optimistic idealism of newlyweds who think they won't fall victim to the divorce statistics. But it's also partly due to genetics, where deep down inside, men and women still hold out for the ideal relationship that the old contract promised. In other words, men's and women's genetic desire to get married blinds them to the modern day challenges and realities that make marriage the horrible and dangerous proposition that it is today. That doesn't mean that every woman out there is some money-grubbing gold digger using marriage as a tremendously inefficient way to extract money and attention from men. The truth is that most women don't get married to get divorced. But what women want out of marriage has certainly changed, making it the risky and failed institution it is today. To quote Aaron Clary, most women want to get married and have children. Very few want to be wives and mothers. The person we think who wrote this book is quoting himself, which is one of the funniest fucking things I've seen.
That's so hot.
And this most aptly describes what women want out of marriage today. Most women in the West don't view a husband and kids as the human beings in life that will give them ultimate purpose, meaning, love, and reason to exist. Instead, most women view husbands and children as things to have, boxes to check, status symbols to display. And this is no more evidenced than by two blatant actions most women take. One, how quickly they are to divorce the love of their life and ignore their wedding vows when things aren't right. And two, how so few women raise their children versus outsourcing them to daycare, nannies, and public schools. What do we think?
If society had the resources for women, we wouldn't have to outsource and we could raise our children ourselves. Crazy.
But that'd be communism, and we all hate that.
Oh yeah, shit, sorry. But no,
Yeah.
it is seriously so hot when a man writing a book quotes himself. It just ugh, just want to jump on that.
We're going to get into this in some future episode, but this is not the first time he has admitted to quoting himself. In one of the other books he's written, he specifically mentions how on occasion he would refer to websites and content that he had written to prove points to people in arguments without telling them that he had written that content. So, just saying, there's a precedent being set. Naomi, I do have to wonder, do you plan at some point to collect a husband like you would a Coach bag?
Definitely, because you know me, every weekend I'm out at the Coach store collecting my
The Coach
bags.
convention. Yeah.
The Coach convention, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I guess I'm confused because this argument doesn't make a lot of sense. If women want husbands and children in order to tick boxes, why would they then get rid of them? Is the idea they're just going to trade up like you discussed in chapter 3? I think there's actually a pretty big stigma against divorced people in our society. Just marrying so you can say you were married will probably have some serious repercussions for your social life. I'm not saying divorced people are treated as though they have the plague, but A, I think people who are divorced have a much more difficult time on dating apps. And B, I think there's a lot of people who have divorced individuals in their social circles who will talk about those divorced individuals and their many failings, either real or imagined. What do you think?
I wouldn't say that they're treated any like divorced people are treated any differently in society, but of course I'm not divorced, so I can't say that. I would say that like yeah, it kind of sucks, but I also think it depends on why you got divorced. I think that if you
That's
just
fair.
got like divorced because you were the one who cheated versus like oh you were the one cheated on, there's like a pity sense if you like get cheated
Mm-hmm.
on and it's like oh you should go find better. But if you cheated, then there's a stigma. But then usually you're with your side hoe by then, so it doesn't really matter.
That's fair. I don't know. Like, I've seen a lot of messy breakups in my friend circles and personal life, and it seems that if you were friends with one partner in that relationship before, the likelihood is very, very high you will trust whatever they say about the breakup. It's
Yeah.
very, very rare you're like, oh, it's the other person I didn't know nearly as well who was like the person who was in the right. It happens on
Yeah.
occasion, but I think it's very easy for someone to paint themselves as the hero of, whatever interactions led to the eventual breakup. Um, I have to wonder how this is different than, say, 100 years ago, him talking about like women not raising their kids. I have to wonder how, like, 100 years ago, when public school started, he didn't have a problem with women who were living under the old contract sending their kids to the first public schools. In fact, like, the whole concept of like sending children to school basically happened under the prior generations before the new contract started. And he thought that worked out okay, I think. So I don't know why it would be any different. In fact, he's been arguing for most of this chapter that women don't like pull their weight in society. And one of the big things we've talked about is women can't participate in the workforce to the same rate as men because they're stuck with child rearing. So isn't it a good thing that like women are outsourcing their children to the state because then they can do more work for the industrial leviathan?
There is no winning as a woman. No, there's no winning as a woman. If you work, you are seen as you're not seen as compassionate. You are not seen as a good mother. If you don't work, you are seen as lazy. You're seen as not a part of society, so on and so forth. Like there's no winning as a woman, and he is just proving that further and further. You read this book and then you watch the Barbie movie, and they're complete opposites. Still haven't seen it, but from what I've heard.
Yeah, he gets it from osmosis. Yeah, I
Yeah,
did pull some
obviously.
stats to prove that I can actually research things and support my arguments. Kids started going to public schools in the United States in the 1820s. By 1910, a period that we think is under the old contract, but again, he's never really specified like when the old contract started or ended. By 1910, 72% of children attended public schools. I also think that like he thinks there are certain degrees that are worth pursuing, like engineering, and you really can't pursue an engineering degree without like basic knowledge of math, which you get by attending a school. I'm not saying a parent can't teach that to you, but if the platonic ideal is for a woman to spend all of her time in the household, you would think she wouldn't pick up that knowledge to homeschool her kids with. So he's just throwing in every single argument and like gripe and grievance he has without really regarding how they impact each other. When you throw them all in the same pot, they're going to bounce off each other and there's going to be like problems if you think at all about what he's saying. I think someone reading this who like hates women isn't going to pick up on that, but any person reading this who's like slightly skeptical of the men's right movements might have some problems. I don't know. Also, here's something that's interesting. So he says one of the big problems is how few women raise their children versus outsourcing them to daycare nannies in public schools, which to me implies like basic homeschooling. Homeschoolers go to college 23% less than public school students. So if you're trying to get your kid,
Huh.
male or female, into a high paying, important for society, that's in quotes, job, you probably shouldn't homeschool your kid. I don't know if that's due to like a lack of resources. Like maybe if you're homeschooling your kid, you might be closer to the poverty line and can't afford like driving
Yeah.
your kid to school every day. But I also think that like based upon my perceptions of homeschooling in Arizona, a lot of people who homeschool are wealthier because like one parent makes enough money, the other parent can stay at home all the time. So something worth digging into. But yeah, homeschooling is not the way you get your child to be a productive member of society in his eyes. One other interesting stat from Gitnuck's Market Hub, an article titled Two Working Parent Households 2023, a look at the stats. In 2020, 59.8% of married couple households had both parents employed, with 71.2% of mothers and 92.3% of fathers in the labor force. So 60% of all households, both parents are working. In general, 92% of fathers are working, and 71% of mothers are working. In 2019, 61% of dual income families had at least one child, and 37% of couples with the youngest child aged 6 to 17 both worked full time. Dual income households are becoming increasingly common. They're not actually going down, they're becoming increasingly common, with the percentage rising from 51.9% to 53.3% from 2010 to 2019. I don't know if this is by choice or because rent, housing, healthcare, food have all gone up and both parents now have to work in order to just scrape and survive. My point here is that under the incredible world of capitalism, most women don't even have the choice of homeschooling. But also, as we've mentioned, women fall behind in their careers almost entirely due to taking time off to work for motherhood. So yeah, it's a mishmash of bad arguments. You dig into any of the logic or the evidence, it just falls apart. But women suck and marriage sucks, so obviously you should believe him. Now, he does provide some good evidence, Naomi. And his evidence is a scene from a fictional movie. Again, it was a movie, but the scene in American Beauty where Annette Bening's character is more worried about a couch than having sex with her husband is sadly entirely accurate when describing Western women's view of marriage, husbands, and children. So, why look at the Census Bureau when you can cite scenes from American Beauty? Naomi, have you seen American Beauty?
No.
Do you know anything about American Beauty?
No, I know more about American Psycho.
That's fair. Naomi, American Beauty was a film that came out in the late 90s. I think either 1998 or 1999. It may even have won an Academy Award. The main character of American Beauty is not Annette Bening or Burning. It's a different person. Can you think of any famous but slightly controversial actors who were very popular in the 1990s?
Kevin Spacey.
You are correct, Naomi. It was Kevin Spacey. It's weird that he doesn't mention Kevin Spacey in a book published in the year of our Lord 2023. I don't know. Seems like it's important to bring up that Kevin Spacey was in that film, but what do I know? So the scene he's referencing occurs about halfway through a film, American Beauty, which is about a middle-aged office worker, played by Kevin Spacey, who finds new meaning in his life after years of hopelessness working this dead-end office job. The reason I think he doesn't mention Kevin Spacey is because if you think about Kevin Spacey, you immediately think about all the sex pest crimes that Kevin Spacey was credibly accused of. And you also start to think about the plot of American Beauty. American Beauty has a number of interesting artistic choices, indicating how Kevin Spacey's character has started to put his life back together. One of them is he begins working a job as a fast food employee at a drive-through, and he does this because he remembers when he was a teenager he used to work at this hamburger stand and considered it to be one of the happiest and most fulfilling times of his life. And now that he no longer has to worry about money due to something that happened earlier in the film, he decides to do that. Another way he gets his mojo back in this film is by working out and getting into shape. Awesome. Something which causes his daughter's 18-year-old cheerleader friend to start obsessing over him, as teenage girls are wont to do. Obsessing over their balding friend's father, who's in his either late 30s, early 40s in this film. So yes, good artistic choice, wonderful story about the power of middle-aged men seducing teenage girls. Kevin Spacey in the film gets very obsessed with this teen girl. He begins repeatedly to dream about having sex with her, but it's okay. Naomi, I don't want you to have terrible thoughts, because he does get the opportunity to have sex with her later in the film, but then decides not to, which proves that he's a good person. She's lying half naked on his couch, and he's like, no, I'm not, because I'm a decent human being. But he could have, because he's really hot and sexy, and teen girls were attracted to him.
But it's okay, because she's 18.
I think she's 18. I don't actually remember if she is in the script. She's a cheerleader.
You literally
on
said
her high
earlier
school.
that she was 18.
I thought she was, but now I'm thinking about it. Anyway, so it's a cool film about middle-aged dads dealing with shit. No notes. Also, Thora Birch, who I seem to recall our family was big fans of growing up, plays his daughter and is really, really good in this role, which is cool because this is back before Thora Birch's father went in and destroyed her entire acting career. Now, the scene in question he's talking about, where Annette Binning, his wife, is more worried about a couch than having sex with her husband, occurs about halfway through the film. He's lying around at home playing with like his new toys that he's purchased after he's quit his job, and she comes into the house. She's this corporate coded, she has the haircut. She's this high focus, high tech real estate executive wife, and he tries to seduce her when she comes back. And as he's like making out with her on the sofa, she tells him not to spill his beer on the couch. Now, this kills the mood, and they start like yelling at each other. He's like, "You're so materialistic." The couch, Naomi, is a $4,000 Italian leather sofa. And I gotta say, as someone who like has spent over $1,000 on a couch set in the last couple of years, I don't want that to get dirty. Like, it is not a $4,000 couch. Even my old couches that I like, purchased for $20 at Goodwill, I did not want to get dirty. The point of the film is like, oh, she's so materialistic and vain, and Kevin Spacey has become like perfect and transcended everything by not focusing on material possessions. But like looking back, you're kind of like, maybe she had a point to not destroy their furniture, their $4,000 Italian leather sofas, in a moment of like, we could just move to the bedroom and continue making out and having sex. It's a film that has all sorts of weird messages, and looking back, it is not perfect. Now, again, I really like my gray sectional, but it also is not something I'm particularly attached to. While I'd like to keep it in good condition so I can continue taking naps on it and not be grossed out by it, I'm more than willing to sell it if we downsized homes or if I found another comfortable piece of napping furniture. The point of that scene in the movie is supposed to be like Kevin Spacey is smarter than his wife, and this is like this disagreement that's happening between them. But I'm arguing that she's actually in the right, because you can be both a rational individual who's also attracted to your husband and not place a huge amount of value on your possessions all at once. Like, that's totally possible. Life is not a dichotomy. Now, Aaron is using this to demonstrate how, like, all women of a certain age, all women in this new generation are too vapid and focused on their material possessions. But when you think about, like, the actual content of the movie, you think about, like, the message of the scene, and you think for, like, 5 minutes about, like, what's actually involved in the stakes, I'm not sure the point is being made that he's trying to make. He's also acting like a queer lady in her 40s. In her 40s in 1999 is the same as 20-something girls today who probably weren't even born when the movie came out. It's also a movie. Figure I'd underscore that. It's fictional. Now, any questions?
No, it's not. I like love how there's this like portrayal of like, oh, she's so like vain and she like has so much she's more care for the leather sofa, but it's kind of like, okay, if your husband's going off the deep end, you have to think about what you're going to take in the divorce. She obviously like wanted to take the sofa. She's like, don't ruin my sofa.
From a very meta perspective, if you look back on the films of like the late 80s, 1990s, even early 2000s, there was this undercurrent of like men trying to portray themselves as the rational part of relationships. There was almost this pushback against like women entering the career or the workplace and like becoming obsessed with like getting the best job and having like the best looks and having a pretty house to like host fancy dinner parties. And there was a lot of subplots in films of this era where there's just like a bitchy wife who's overly focused on like keeping a pristine house and keeping up appearances. And you have to wonder like how much of that was influenced by just like Hollywood writers thinking that women were like getting too uppity and wanting to show it to them by writing male characters who are much smarter and like less concerned with material needs. I don't know. Food for thought.
Okay.
Moving on. Things like couches are things to have, not humans to love. This means women are not so much negotiating in bad faith as they're negotiating in naivete. Today's society conditions women have a myopic, solipsistic, and ultimately selfish view of relationships, which is why most marriages fail. Not true. This is why nearly every wife gets fat after getting married. I think having children probably plays a role in that as well. This is why many wives cut off the sex, either after the honeymoon or after having kids. Naomi, do you want to talk at all about like vaginal tearing that occurs during pregnancy?
Oh, vaginal is not a word, it's vaginal, Joel.
I learned something here today.
So vaginal tearing is a very real scenario that can happen to the point where there's extreme tearing. There's like levels of tearing. I think it's like one, two, or three. Extreme tearing is from your vagina all the way to your butthole. So you basically just have one big hole down there. And that happens during childbirth because Western medicine thinks that if it's easier for the doctor, it's obviously going to be better for the patient. So you can only give birth in one position at a hospital when you're actually allowed to give birth in any position. You can give birth standing up, you can give birth sitting down. You don't have to give birth with your legs up in the air like
A lot of
an
cultures do
upside down
squatting.
cow. You can also give birth in a bathtub. So
Hmm.
you can also give birth at home. And a lot of people have found that when they have a doula and they give birth at home, there's a significant amount, like less amount of tearing. With that, there's also this thing called I think it's called the father stitch or like the dad stitch
Husband
that
stitch.
is husband stitch, thank you, that is given sometimes to women that will cinch up their vagina just a little extra for the husband to enjoy sexual intercourse even more because apparently men can't enjoy sexual intercourse unless their woman's vagina is the size of a dime in diameter. So, that's super fun, but doctors started doing that, especially male doctors started stitching up women just a little tighter. There's another big reason why women don't want to have sex with men after childbirth. The vast majority of men don't realize that taking care of a child is a two-person job. Getting up in the middle of the night is a two-person job. Changing diapers, again, a two-person job. So when you're telling me, oh, women don't want to have sex because they're the only one that's tired and they're the only one that's getting up in the middle of the night and they're the only one that's taking care of their child and their partner, their supposed partner, isn't taking care of their child, yet she's still expected to do the laundry and take care of the house and make the food. It makes sense why women are closing their legs because they don't feel supported and they don't feel like they can trust their partner in an intimate situation. I don't get horny when my partner is making me treat them like a child. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
Some people do get horny, and that's okay. But in other instances, it's not okay. We're not here to
As long
kink
as it
shame.
doesn't, as long as it does not involve animals and or children, I'm good with it.
Fair enough. I did do a quick check when you were talking. Thank you for that elaborate on the cuff. We didn't coordinate this. Then we just had all that off the top of our head. Information. I did check the Royal College of Gynecologists and the other word obstetricians in the United Kingdom estimates that a third or fourth degree tear, also known as a anal sphincter injury, occurs in about 3 in 100 women having a vaginal birth. It is more common with a first vaginal birth occurring in 6 in 100 women compared with 2 in 100 women who are having a second child or third child previously having a vaginal birth. So
And
yes,
you can
extremely
also
painful.
it can also cause hernias, which have to be like surgically taken care of. So if you're
Yeah.
getting stitched up and something pops, you're fucked. If you get a hernia because of that, you're fucked. Like it's a childbirth is not glamorous.
I think also like we should ignore your point about like raising children after birth being very difficult. Like in the United States, we push women back into the workforce as soon as possible. Like some women go back within like a week of having a child, and like extremely traumatic stressors being placed upon their body, and then also have to like take care of their child because their husband isn't stepping up. And so as we've discussed multiple times already in this multi-part series, like a lot of women feel their husbands like are not providing for them in the way that Aaron might think husbands might need to provide for women. And so their level of attractiveness to their husbands goes down considerably. But it's also
Well,
like,
it
I'm in extreme pain. I am extremely stressed. I'm not mentally sound. I haven't been sleeping enough. And you're expecting me to do all this shit. Sex is the least of the priorities.
We also put a huge amount of emphasis on the child in our society. We don't put enough emphasis on the mother and caring for the mother postpartum. So there's a large amount of women that suffer from postpartum depression for a variety of reasons, but one
Mm-hmm.
of them is because they feel as if they were not given enough attention after having sometimes a very traumatic birth. And birth is obviously traumatic, no matter who it is, but there are instances where people have extremely traumatic births. Something happens, they have preeclampsia, they they're bleeding out, they have to go into emergency C-section, so on and so forth. And so we do not give the attention to new mothers that we do to new babies. We get excited about new babies. New babies are cool, awesome, they're exciting, but we don't give that same amount of effort and emphasis on mothers, which creates a sense of, okay, am I even important in
And
this?
I think it's not just in like the 6 months to a year after the pregnancy. We're not even getting into the fact that like a lot of women feel they disappear as soon as their child emerges, because like a lot of friends suddenly are like, hey, I didn't get you a birthday gift, I got your kid a birthday gift on your birthday.
Exactly.
Like you're no
Yeah.
longer someone who I like treat as a human. I'm directing all of my energy and attention. And it's not even saying that like women are arrogant or like women have like unrealistic expectations. It's like I used to be a fully realized human being in the mind of my friends, family, people around me, and suddenly I'm just like the second class citizen who exists only to support my child, which seems a little mentally scarring.
Yeah, like you are what your relationship is to other people. You are a wife, you are a girlfriend, you are a sister, you are a mother in this case, and you get taken away. Like your humanity essentially gets taken away because you become a mother.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a reason many women cut off sex, and it's not related to women thinking of husbands as like accessories, like a Coach bag. He continues and says that this is why women bitch about house chores while the man is fixing the house and cars. Maybe, sometimes, I don't know. This is why most women pay other people to raise their children. Most women are getting married and having children for themselves, not you, which is completely antithetical to love. Regardless, because men have a strong urge to find the one. Excuse me. When he said the one, I felt the inescapable desire to burp. You cannot let those desires land you in the legal contract of marriage. You can have them land in the illegal contract of marriage, but not the legal one. You must know that while women also have the genetic urge to find the one, today's society conditions women to view their husband and children as assets, not as their purpose and reason in life. And when you combine this self-centered view of marriage with the legal and financial risks of marriage, there is no way any man in the West today should marry. Marriage, no matter how vital it was for all of humanity, is now officially off the table. Women deserve less. I think we've adequately discussed that, and so we're going to get into a new section called victim status and preferential treatment. And we're going to stop this section almost immediately
Okay.
because he decides to fill it, the first part, with just a quote from someone else, which is a great tactic he's used to amazing effect throughout this book. So this new section is victim status and preferential treatment. He opens it with a quote by comedian Bill Burr. And the quote is, "Women are surrounded by this tornado of misinformation, but no one corrects them because we want to fuck them." Thank you, Bill Burr. Incredible guy. No issues with sexism whatsoever. I was interested in seeing the comedy special this came from. Bill Burr. Bill Burr has this weird thing where like he says some incredibly misogynistic stuff, and I do think like Bill Burr has some issues with like sexism and not treating women with respect. But then often he'll follow that up and like criticize men who have almost nearly identical opinions. He's like, I'm going to say this sexist thing, and you idiots believe that sexist thing. So I was like, okay, I want to see like what Bill Burr actually said. And what I discovered is the quote he just provided, the quote he wrote down in his book that was published, is not the quote from Bill Burr. This is from a comedy special, Let It Go, by Bill Burr, where he says the following: "Women are constantly patting themselves on the back because nobody corrects them because we want to fuck them." He then goes on and says, there's this like tornado of misinformation. So Aaron combines both of those sentences into one, making it a little more concise. But Bill Burr is saying something slightly different. He's saying women are deluded, they're constantly patting themselves on the back and no one corrects them. And Aaron is saying women aren't deluded, they're constantly like given bad information. It's a slight change, but it's like a noticeable one. And this led me down yet another rabbit hole, Naomi. So he's misquoting Bill Burr here. I can't find any results for Bill Burr saying this quote. The only thing I can find when I search the quote that Aaron Clarey provides is conservative pundits. And a lot of people have quoted this. A lot of people on conservative blogs and forums and Reddit have used this exact quote, misquoting Bill Burr. So I was interested, Where did the first misquote of Bill Burr that other people have been citing come from? And I think I discovered it. I'm doing journalism, Naomi. Oh, this makes me so happy. So the first one is on a blog called Captain Capitalism. It's in a post from September 2015, written by one Aaron Clary. At least I think it's him. Captain Capitalism does not appear to use his real name on the site, but he's advertising multiple books by Aaron, and when you look at the collection of his blog posts on Amazon, you can actually buy books that are a collection of Captain Capitalism's blog posts. You find Aaron Clary's name on that too. I'm pretty fucking sure it's Aaron Clary. So once again, Aaron Clary is quoting Aaron Clary. He put in this quote by Bill Burr that is in fact a misquote of Bill Burr that he used on a blog he wrote many years ago in 2015.
It's like when you watch a movie one time and you're trying to quote it at school the next day and you get it so wrong that it's like a totally different quote.
And then he said, "Luke, it's me. I'm your daddy. It was so incredible." So I look at the Captain Capitalism blog and I find the article where this exact quote occurs. It is an article titled "Blame Women, parentheses, disproportionately, for the collapse of Western civilization." In all fairness to Aaron, it doesn't look like he has just copy and pasted former blog posts into this book. It looks like he's taken the exact same ideas that he's written about for years since his 2015 blog and put similar versions of them in this book, but he rewrote them. So it's not exactly plagiarism. I don't think it's crazy to think he banged out new ways of saying the same thing all over again because of how shoddily this is all written. This post in question on Captain Capitalism's blog bemoans that women have no skills and vote for Democrats who take our money. Thematically similar, you might say, to this chapter. He ends it with some solutions, which I only include to further underline what the end goal of these people is. He doesn't state these solutions in this text, Why Women Deserve Less, but the same person, Aaron Clary, who wrote this book, is not aiming for something as simple as peacefully spending less time with women or apart from women. And we'll get to that in a second. So to quote his exact post, and again, this is all to bring up this Bill Burr quote, "The solution to all of our problems, to be frank, there is none. This entire post about the downfall of Western civilization is merely one for posterity, wherein I will be able to say, 'I told you so,' for the rest of my life, as well as an exercise in philosophical and theoretical thought. The left is too heavily funded, well too positioned in education, media, government, and the universities, and have done such a good job of brainwashing women that there will never be a significant percentage of women that will wake up and heed the points I've made above. Additionally, in a comedic but still 100% truthful sense, in the wise words of Bill Burr, women are surrounded by this tornado of misinformation about how great they are, and nobody corrects them because we want to fuck them." By the way, he links the exact 3-minute bit to the Bill Burr piece, which I found when I found this blog post, which is how I was able to check the quote. So he provides a citation, and the citation says he misquoted it.
This is only in e-book form, right? Or is this are there physical copies of this book?
Captain Capitalism blog?
No, I'm talking about this book, Why Women Deserve Less.
No, you can buy physical copies of this book.
Okay, so you're telling me he linked something in his book.
No. This book gives the Bill Burr quote with no citation. When I found the citation on his blog, there was a link to the video. Yeah.
Okay.
So again, he's talking about the solutions to the problem women have posed Western civilization. He continues, "If we are serious about not throwing away the best gift humanity has ever given itself, I guess Western civilization, and we do not wish to dishonor the untold number of men who paid incalculable prices over the past 6,000 years, the actual length of human civilization, weird how he changes that to 200,000 years, we need to look at who has the right to vote. The obvious solution to all of our problems is just to rescind women's suffrage. The various leftist political parties in Western nations would never recoup from such a loss, and we could very easily enact, or rescind, the legislation necessary to put Western civilization back on the fast track. However, this is not the answer. If we were to rescind women's right to vote, why not blacks? If not blacks, why not Jews? If not Jews, why not dashingly handsome half-Irish economists with a penchant for video games and motorcycle riding? The road merely goes back to the tyranny we're wishing to stave off. The answer lies in the book, in the founding principle of Western civilization, merit. Admittedly, I've been very hard on women in this treatise, but rightfully so. However, while the majority of women do vote against freedom, we all know women personally who are not naive, who do not vote with their hearts, who are not stuck at stage one thinking, actually do know the difference between a million and a trillion. We know women who desperately love their husbands, desperately love their children, and take the time to study the finances, economics, and politics of this nation before dizzily casting off their vote for the politician who promises them the most money. Concurrently, we also know blacks, Hispanics, Asians, Jews, Madagascarians, gays, Eskimos, Indians, Muslims, agnostics, Catholics, and lesbians who also earn their keep, study the country's finances, and also desire to vote for freedom and against the state. Ergo, we cannot rely on mere physical traits or religious beliefs, but rather whether they are contributing members of society who have earned the right to vote, not merely spat out of a vagina within the US borders. And there are ways to do that, some of which have already been done. For example, and he has examples, in the embryonic years of the United States, you not only had to be a white male to vote, you also had to own property. The founding fathers had this requirement because not only did they not want blacks or women to vote, but also they didn't want stupid white men to vote. You couldn't just have been born a white male. You also had to prove you could work and manage your finances accordingly, that you were a productive member of society. And requiring ownership of property was a proxy for that hurdle. However, while that may have had the intended effect in 1790, today we have the technology that is much better and much more meritorious voting franchise that can be given. Taxes. Very simply, if you want to vote, you need to have paid taxes. If you collect a government check, no. If you're on EBT, no. Are you on TANF? No. Are you on disability? No. Social Security? No. Housing assistance? No. Attending a state university and getting a subsidy from a taxpayer? No. You must be a contributing member of this society, paying into the government to have a say in how this country is run. You must not be a parasite collecting a government check, making you, by definition, a ward on the state. This discriminates against no one, but ensures those who are paying for the government are the ones determining how it is managed, and is thus far, in my economist mind of thinking, the best way to award the right to vote. Of course, sadly, as I've said before, this is all academic. Too many people who are too vested in the demise of Western civilization already have the vote. And too many people, both men and women, are just too plain, dumb, stupid, ignorant, and naive to listen to reason, evidence, logic, and reality. But let it be said and noted that when Western civilization finally collapses, when Rome version 2.0 falls, when humanity's greatest gift to itself is taken away, it was the female voter and her naivete that was disproportionately to blame. And those 6,000 years of human pain, suffering, sacrifice, blood, and war were undone by 60 years of childish, spoiled, petulant feminism.
I'm sorry, 60 years?
I guess that's the new contract period?
No, I feel like he's just very wrong about when he thought women's suffrage started.
Fair point. Yeah, so that's the author of this text in a completely unrelated text that just happens to cover the exact same content as this text, talking about how disabled people, children, and most women don't deserve voting rights. Cool stuff. He's also like, maybe we should just take away the right to vote from women. But he's like, no, I mean, it would solve all of our problems. But like, maybe it's not a perfect solution. Yeah, I threw that in because it's really important to understand that when we say that, like, there's explicitly fascist ideas at the heart of this, the author who wrote this has explicitly said these things before. He's like, if you are not giving your blood to the industrial machine, you are not worthy of life and the protection of the state. And you can't participate in our society. It's good stuff. Yeah, anyways, if you're poor, you don't deserve rights, men. Only rich people, including Tim Amazon, also known as Jeff Bezos, should be allowed to make decisions on the part of our society. I guess the other implication is like, he's kind of implying that if you pay more taxes, you should get more of a say in how society is run, right? Like, if the most important thing is like having buy-in, the more money you pay, the more buy-in you should have. That kind of logically follows. But also a lot of billionaires just don't pay taxes.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking about.
I don't actually know if like billionaires would get the right to vote in this scenario. Maybe it's just like upper middle class people. Make sure you quote Bill Burr properly next time, and I won't go down this rabbit hole. Moving on. Again, remember this whole section started where he's like, we need to discuss the problems of victim status and preferential treatment. And he's like, well, women are such victims, they shouldn't be allowed to vote. Anyways, the male sex drive gives women preferential treatment. We'll throw our friends under the bus to get laid. We'll leave an extra tip in the hopes of impressing a girl. We'll lie to women to spare their feelings. This is so we don't offend them, as offending them would lessen our chances of fucking them. But men are not the only people who give women preferential treatment. All of society does. And this is more to do with human evolution and survival than sexism or misandry, as women are much more valuable than men in terms of reproductive value. A woman only produces one egg every month, while men can produce millions of sperm every day. Furthermore, once a woman is impregnated, it takes 9 months for a single human to be born. And during that time, she can no longer get pregnant, but the man can go on to impregnate as many women as he wants. I don't think this would actually happen in his worldview because women don't really want to have sex with men anymore.
I love how he's just explaining why every man should get a vasectomy.
That's an interesting point. In short, because eggs are rare and sperm is plentiful, women are the reproductive bottleneck to the species. Have you ever been called a reproductive bottleneck before?
I'm going to put that in my Instagram bio. Reproductive bottleneck.
Put that on a business card and hand that out to
Yes.
guys you go on dates with that, like, the dates don't work out. Because of this, society has evolved to give women preferential treatment. There is the rule of women and children first. Men are the ones who die in war. Men did, and still do, all of the heavy lifting. Funny story, I was reading a text about, like, some of the problems in, like, culture with men right now, and it was discussing how there's like a serious education gap that's opened up that we're going to need to address at some point. But it also went over like all the different ways like women have caught up or even surpassed men in society that like men aren't even aware of. And one of them is most men no longer do jobs involving heavy lifting, right? Most men are no longer like day laborers working at refineries.
Yeah.
So the grip strength of men used to be, I think, twice as much as the grip strength of women. Now they're basically equal. Men and women give handshakes that are like approximately the same strength. And so this idea that like men's strength is so much greater than women's isn't reflected in our current culture. Women arguably have to do more heavy lifting. A lot of jobs now have like lifting requirements so that they can get rid of women. So women have to, step up and put on some muscle in order to do them. A lot more women are doing things like childcare and Amazon labor, which requires them to be like active and physically fit. A lot more men are doing office jobs. So yeah, like this idea that men are the stronger sex might be true in like a world where we only did combat, but is not true in our society right now. Women are usually protected and shielded in society, especially while pregnant. Deference is usually given to them in nearly all social situations. What do we think?
I need to put reproductive bottleneck on my business card. I think that's just as good as cock block.
We need to keep track of all these phrases because this is some good ideas for like our Patreon store.
Yeah.
Jot that down.
Like get a t-shirt. Get that on a mug. Get a t-shirt that says that. Yeah. Like that'd be so hot. You pull up to the club and you're like reproductive bottleneck.
Could that be our next logo? It's just us like pointing thumbs at ourselves and our thumbs are like pointing at t-shirts that say reproductive bottleneck.
Yeah. I think that's a really great idea.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so can we talk about something really quick? Because he's talking about how men are the ones who die in war, and men do all the heavy lifting, and blah, 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 blah. Shit.
Well said.
Women are now on the front lines. I don't know if he knows this, but that's been a while since that happened. Women also go to war. Women are also in the military. Shut your fucking dog-ass mouth.
Also, the reason women weren't allowed in the armed forces was because men prevented them from joining for the longest time.
Yeah, and also women can, like there's the women can also lift weight. I don't know if you know this, but like we can lift heavy things. There's, a big culture around the gym. There's a big gym culture, and there's an even bigger like a weightlifting culture. And there's weightlifting competitions that women are a part of. I don't know if he knows this, but like women hold big thing.
Another t-shirt idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just don't understand why he thinks that women are protected and shielded from like in society when literally when we're left with a child by a man who decides that he doesn't want to be in their life anymore, and that he doesn't want to raise the kid that he has, you know, inseminated. I don't understand why the fuck we're not shielded and protected in society then. That's fucking bullcrap.
But Naomi, women are shown deference in nearly every social situation. He said it. He said the words. He said a truth. How can you argue with it?
Do you know how often I've opened my fucking mouth in society and a man has shot me down and said "shut the fuck up" or something to the equivalent?
That's an interesting point. I hadn't even thought about like mansplaining and like women being talked over in office work groups, which is a common phenomenon. I think one stat I heard is that if women speak 30% of the time in a meeting, men think they're speaking more than the men.
Hmm.
I don't know, something to keep in mind. Yeah, let's push back against this. The idea that deference is given to women in nearly all social situations. This is not based in reality. I think it's true to a certain extent in some parts of Western civilization, but is no means a truism for all of the planet. So SBS.com, an Australian paper, I believe, had an article in 2018, published March 18, 2018, by Yasmin Nuwan. It was titled "The Mother is the Last to Eat in Developing Countries." It says more than 120 million women in developing countries are underweight. Given that women are typically in charge of their household's food production, experts say this female hunger is also due to gender inequality. In some parts of the world, mostly the West, to be female is to be recognized as powerful, resilient, and in receipt of the same respect given to a man of similar stature or character in charge. But if you live in a developing country across Asia or Africa, to be female could mean you are hungry even though you're in charge of your household's food. To be female means you're a farmer who lacks access to the same work tools or land rights as your male counterpart. To be female may mean you starve, suffer malnutrition, and die. In South Sudan, accessibility to food is much less for women than men, says Berhi Terwolde Berhan, Plan International Australia's Disaster Risk and Resilience Manager. That is really the tradition because women make sure the men eat first and they're the ones to eat last. This is the same in sub-Saharan Africa, Zambia, and Malawi. In some areas, there are also food and water shortages. So access to food and water is really tilted first towards the men, then the children, and then the mother who is always the last to eat. At the end of the day, the gender with the most access to food is the decision maker who has the power in the household or community, Drillin says, and that's usually the male. The United Nations estimates that 70% of the 1.3 billion people in poverty worldwide are women. 70%. More than 120 million women in developing countries are underweight. In South Asia, for example, 60% of women are underweight. Josie Huxtable, gender advisor for Care Australia, cites gender inequality as a major cause and effect of gender and poverty. It doesn't just hit women as food consumers, it hits them also as food producers. Among economically active women in developing countries, almost 80% spend their working hours producing food through agriculture. Rural women make up nearly 50% of the agricultural labor force. In South Asia, Huxtable estimates this figure is as high as 70%. She explains that women in impoverished communities often don't have access to land because laws might exclude them from inheriting land, training schemes, because most agricultural trainers are men, and credit for a loan to invest in their farm. They may also lack control of the income they earn from their crops. Unfortunately, poverty and hunger are also intergenerational. In Terwolder Burhan's experience, malnutrition is very high among females generally, and more specifically in pregnant women. He says the current situation is so bad for pregnant women in South Sudan and other parts of Africa where conflict rages that they can die purely because they don't have enough food to eat. It's not a healthy situation. These mothers battling malnutrition are more likely to give birth to underweight babies. We find that underweight babies are 20% more likely to die before the age of 5 than a normal weight baby. Drillin estimates that half of all the pregnant women in developing countries where Plan International Australia works are anemic. This also causes about 110,000 deaths during childbirth each year, and that's just in developing countries throughout Asia and Africa. So is that the world, Byron, Aaron, is that the world they prefer? Because that's the one that actually exists right now. I think we should also refer back to like the front porch to the back seat episodes we've done, where they talk a lot about modern dating etiquettes arising not from some 20,000 years of human history, 200,000 years of human history, but mainly just dating and etiquette magazines telling women in the 1940s they could only be attractive if they allowed the man to do all the work for them. That was built on scientific research in the 1900s that implied this strict dichotomy of man provider, woman breeder, which we've already debunked multiple times in this series. My point here is not that taking care of women is bad, but it's not as natural as he presumes. It's not universal throughout all of our societies. It's not even universal across Western civilization. And I think a lot of women would prefer men stop being so condescending with things like opening their car doors for them, which has some implications further down the line. How are we feeling?
Damn. So I when I was in a research study class in my undergrad, I had this professor that was working a lot on research studies in South Africa surrounding HIV and discrimination in African cultures and so on and so forth. And so he talked a lot about how a lot of men in South Africa, we're talking about just South Africa specifically because that's where he did his studies in, were um, so afraid to tell anyone that they were having same sex that they would often give their wives HIV. And so then the wives were tossed away when they were tested for HIV and they started to get sick, and society would just toss them away. So there's been funds and different groups that have organized that create basically mini communities where just women and children that live in them that are living with HIV due to a variety of reasons, that help sponsor women and their families so that they can have their own crops, they can have their own land, they can have their own animals and actually survive. And often these women are a lot happier when they are alone than they were with their husbands.
What?
Crazy, I know.
Crazy.
It might be
Damn.
due to the fact that the man didn't want to be in the relationship with the woman, but at the same time it's kind of like, okay, if they're eating last, they're probably just happier that they're getting fed.
If they do get fed, that is the rub.
Yeah.
So Naomi, I don't think we're finishing chapter 6 this session.
So I'm gonna hurt you with my words.
I can do that to myself. Plenty easy.
Just look in the mirror. Stupid.
I want to throw in a couple of last things so we can 100% certainly finish this chapter next time we get together.
I'm gonna hurt you.
I love you. You're great.
I love you too.
He's going to say a lot of shit that weirdly has no evidence backing it up in this following section. And it's kind of confusing in the grand scheme of his arguments. I've thrown in a couple of responses to this, but it's going to move pretty quickly because I've only barely put in more effort than he has. He continues and says this preferential treatment continues because it's not a simple matter of throwing a switch, and soon men no longer feel the urge to protect women, or society no longer has ladies' night. It's hardwired into men in society's DNA to treat women better. More modernly, however, a sick and warped deference to women has evolved, because in achieving equality, women now have, and bear with me, the right to vote, to work, to own property, to have bank accounts, etc. And in having these rights, it is no longer men who wish to fuck them, but some key and powerful institutions. These institutions specifically are governments, banks, corporations, schools, and the media. In having the same rights as men, women now have the money and votes these institutions want. And to part with their money and votes, women need to be convinced it is their best interest to do so. But if you look at a traditional nuclear family, none of these institutions stand to profit from a stand-at-home wife. From a stay-at-home wife, the family which lives off of one income. Governments also take in less taxable income as only one of the parents is working. There's also less need for welfare programs to raise bastard and illegitimate kids from broken homes. Plus, every leftist party in the West needs unmarried feminist single women to vote for them, so they remain in power by offering to replace husbands with government checks. 2 notes to regard to this. First, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that governments have done a fuck ton more to make it difficult to apply for and stay on welfare than they have recently done to make it easier. Governments in general in the West don't seem to like welfare programs. I'm sorry, not in the West, in the United States, which is sometimes uniquely evil among our fellow Western nations. The money is, better spent blowing up people in Ukraine or whatever. Also, like we've just discussed, like the PPP program and how almost $1 trillion went out the door to rich people. I don't see him complaining about that, but I think that costs a lot more in the long term. I looked at Bernie Sanders' 2016 and 2020 platforms, and I didn't see anything about replacing husbands with government checks. Maybe
but I
in his
like how he
2024
equates
platform.
I like how he equates husbands to checks and that men can just be replaced with money.
I'm going to look at Cornell West's 2024 platform. He might have something about replacing husbands with government checks. That's totally possible.
Okay.
Schools, specifically colleges, need women to go into tons of debt so they can enrich themselves off them. Universities charge $500 a credit. This allows them to enrich their admin staff and employ armies of worthless social science and liberal arts professors who would find no employment outside academia. Of course, this is in exchange for a worthless degree with no hope of earning money to repay student loans. But this also benefits the government, as schools are ground zero for installing a feminism socialist operating system in women's minds, which guarantees future votes for leftist parties. Corporations love unmarried women. They can double their sales. Women are now working jobs too. However, the country also needs twice the housing, twice the cars, and twice of, well, everything that goes into furnishing homes as nobody lives under one roof. And doubling the labor force also puts downward pressure on wages as you have twice the number of people now vying for the same jobs. I think this is all bad to him, but only if he thinks capitalism is bad, which he obviously doesn't. So he's blaming the natural urge of capitalists to find profit on like the downfall of Western civilization, while also saying women aren't doing enough to work for the same capitalist industries that are creating the downfall of Western civilization. This also isn't surprising. Companies like having people to profit from. News at 11. This is not the slam dunk argument that he thinks it is. I also think that a lot of colleges go out of their way to like both sides a lot of issues. They don't want to appear as though they are leftist dogma powerhouses, and so they provide like incredibly weak versions of conservative arguments just to like give the perception that like they're even-handed, and this misleads kids into thinking that like, oh, both sides of the political spectrum have like solid arguments on different issues. One example is that, I was taking a sustainability course recently, and one of the articles we had to read in a sustainability class was all about how private enterprise is going to solve all the climate change problems because they can uniquely like bring high-tech, high-finance solutions to address all these issues. And the examples they give, if you do any sort of research, you're like, oh, this actually caused a lot of problems when it was implemented. But yes, this was an article provided by a sustainability class to a group of students who allegedly care a lot about sustainability, making the argument that you don't have to worry about sustainability because the private market is going to solve everything. Food for thought. Banks are only more than happy to help corporations by lending women money at 15% APR for a car they can't afford, not to mention credit cards, home equity loans, any other form of borrowing that goes to buy corporate stuff. Of course, these corporations are grateful in return, as these banks have made it so that women are desperately loyal to their employers, as they are now debt slaves living paycheck to paycheck. So I did want to wrap up here because I thought this was a particularly impactful argument to dig into. He's trying to say that women are stupid and going into massive debt and now have to support leftist ideas and take shitty jobs to get out of that debt. But when you dig into it, women have less debt than men do. I don't know if that means men's debt is better or they got it for smarter reasons, but there's more women in the United States than men too. So what's going on, Aaron?
I think it's also
Investopedia.com.
extra funny. I think it's also extra funny that the vast majority of everything on the like market right now for cosmetics and clothes and all those typical things that are targeted at women that can get expensive are still not causing more debt than men have. Like that's interesting to me.
That's an interesting point. I hadn't even thought of that because you're right. Women's clothing, things like bras and underwear, tend to be a lot more expensive. And men, at least in my experience, don't buy as much clothing as women do.
Yeah, and the entire cosmetic industry is targeted at women. And it has been since the conception.
So Investopedia had an article earlier this year, July 26th of this year, by Sabrina Carl, and it says that men and women are almost identical in many of their credit habits. So the average debt and credit by gender, for men, the average credit score is 705. For women is 704. That's a difference of -1 for women. The total debt balances for men, this is the average for all of society, is $338,000. For women is $310,000. So women have on average $28,000 less debt than men do.
Damn.
Now, again, this is for like all of society. So like there's
Yeah.
going to be very wealthy people who've taken out like considerable debt. But boy, that's still a pretty big difference when you average it out across our population. For mortgage debt, men have an average of $211,000, women have an average of $192,000, which means women have approximately $19,000 less in mortgage debt. For HELOC debt, men have $47,000, women have $43,000, so about $4,000 difference. Auto loan debt, men have $20,600, women have $17,800 for about a $3,000 difference. Student loan debt is one of the only areas where women have slightly more. Men have $35,000, women have $36,000, so about $1,000 difference. Personal loan debt, men have $17,700, women have $14,800 for about $3,000 difference. Credit card debt is nearly identical. Men have $6,357, women have $6,232. So that's negative 125. Interestingly, women also have more credit cards than men, but don't have more debt. Men have an average of 3.6 credit cards. Women have an average of 4.5. So women have slightly more student debt than men. We're literally talking like $1,000. They also have 27,000 less total debt on average than men, largely due to mortgages, auto loans, and personal loans. That auto loan one is interesting. I'm like, do men buy more expensive cars than women? Possible. So is it men, actually, who are in the pocket of big employer? Men who made bad financial choices to now push conservative policies like lower taxes to get out of the hole they dug? Men who work themselves to death not because they love society, because they need to get out of the debt holes they found themselves in. He's trying to portray women as being uniquely stupid and incompetent, and because they're uniquely stupid and incompetent, have to get leftist parties to support their bad decisions. But it actually might be men who got themselves into debt with their expensive muscle cars and their faded jeans. I don't know what men wear. They're truck nuts. Their collection of truck nuts, the incredibly expensive gold-plated truck nuts, and now have to vote for conservatives who promise to get rid of all taxes in order to get themselves out of the massive debt they found themselves in. Boy, howdy. But yeah, Aaron doesn't care about the facts. He cares about the narrative. His narrative is women are dumb, therefore women must be in more debt. But when you look at the actual facts, no, men are in more debt. So maybe, Aaron, you're the dumb one. Checkmate.
Yeah, you tell him.
I'm sorry. We can't refer to him as Aaron anymore, Naomi. We have to call him by his preferred name, Captain Capitalism.
Oh, you're right. You're so right.
Yeah. Well, this has been a fun time. I don't know about you, but I sure enjoyed the Why Women Deserve Less Part 6, Chapter 6, Power Hour.
I feel like this is like part 9 of this.
It doesn't end. It's beautiful. It's horrible. It's like Halloween and Easter had a baby. It's a thing of beauty. It's a thing of horror. I don't know where I'm going. I'm just kind of riffing. There's no moisture left in my mouth. I need to stop talking. I'm going to have a sore throat tomorrow.
We love the audience so much. We would love for you to subscribe to our Patreon. We have some special content coming there. You can actually watch this podcast and my genuine reactions to everything that Joel is saying. The bullshit that he is spewing. the bullshit that he is reading and spewing. We hope you all have a great week. We'll give Joel's vocal cords some rest. Wear a condom. Be safe. Get tested on a regular basis. We love you and have a great night.
Donate to our Patreon, but if you can't afford it, we understand that. Please just leave us some likes, some podcast ratings on the platform you use. We'd greatly appreciate it. That helps us get our numbers up. If our numbers go up, that means Naomi can quit her job and become a full-time podcaster, which has always been her dream.
Sure. Have a great week.
We have many thanks for the use of our theme music, which is the song Drop by Ketsa. You can find more of their music online at ketsa.uk. You can also find Date These Guys online on Twitter and Instagram at @DateTheseGuys or visit datetheseguys.org. If you have questions for the podcast or want to be a wealthy sugar parent, please send an email to datetheseguys@gmail.com. If you'd like to support our work, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/datetheseguys. We have behind-the-scenes information, early episode access, participation in polls, and exclusive access to a guy sibling map of date ideas for the Arizona area. Since the world sucks right now, we are currently donating all Patreon proceeds to trans organizations like Trevor Project, a trans suicide prevention organization, and moving assistance funds for those fleeing states outlawing their very existence. Please consider becoming a member and supporting our work today.